One of the time's most influential people of the year and a leader in the Caribbean has recently made a move that has some people across the Caribbean looking over to Barbados, possibly with some envy. Miss Mia Amor Motley has been making quite a few waves as of recent. Well, as of the last couple of years. She has made some speeches, delivered some speeches at the UN, at several global conferences and global events where she has opened a few eyes as to her vision for the future and her ability to articulate it and all of that. And many people in the Caribbean do look and see and think that this lady is a good leader. And she is obviously a pretty good politician. She called a snap election at the beginning of this year and wiped her opposition off the face of the electoral map. And was it Grenada? They had an attempt at doing the same thing, that same kind of quick snap election business, but their luck was not her luck. So she does seem to be a well-liked politician, and she recently made some moves in an announcement to reduce prices all around the world. All around the world, we are seeing right now inflationary prices. Prices are headed on the way up. Food prices in particular, as food is, kind of important to us humans. And all around the world, we are seeing these prices climbing, and in Barbados, their Prime Minister, Miss Motley, has determined that she is going to do something about that. And over here in Trinidad, we are seeing some of the fans of Miss Motley. Here in Trinidad, there are quite a few fans of Miss Motley. We are seeing quite a few of them praising this move, and I'd like to dive a bit into this because these things don't cost nothing. As much as you may hope for them to happen in your country, or you may hope to live in Barbados possibly for some of these goodies as they may seem, I think when we delve a little deeper, we could see that everything has opportunity costs. There are trade-offs for everything. Yes, you may be able to get some cheaper prices now for something, but you may have to pay for it in the future. As, for example, Barbados is currently already in the hold of an IMF program. We're going to get into that. But before we go any further and deeper, as usual, hit that like button. Allow the like button to feel your presence and drop a comment if you have something to say. Share the video for people who may like this kind of content. People who may be looking over to Barbados and saying, yes, look what Miss Motley is doing. That's what we need here in Trinidad. Well, share this to them and maybe you could strike up a conversation about the possibilities of doing it here and what may be the benefits and what may be the disadvantages. If you are not yet subscribed, please do hit that nice red subscribe button right there and let's get into it. An article from Barbados today. Says the article. Barbadians should start to feel some ease from spiraling food prices and electricity costs as early as next week, when a slash in the value-added tax on certain items is expected to take effect. Acknowledging the daily pressures experienced by Barbadians in coping with high prices of essential foods, electricity, and gas, Prime Minister Mia Motley on Thursday announced an $18 million package to bring much needed ease. The relief measures saw an additional 44 food and household items included on a VAT-free list. In some cases, customs duties were removed from certain items, paving the way for reduced prices to consumers starting from next Thursday and ending January 31st next year. So they have a pretty extensive plan in place. In addition to the supermarket ease, parents of school-aged children would not have to worry about finding lunch for their wards during the summer holidays. Motley said the school meals department will continue to provide lunches from July 25th to September 2nd this year. We believe that this is a critical component in ensuring that our school children can have nutritious meals, while at the same time relieving the burden off of the families from being able to move in a position where they do not have to buy additional groceries to ensure that their children can be fed during this period of time. The Ministry of Finance will also offer relief for householders' electricity bills by ensuring we reduce the value-added tax on those electricity bills also. So they announced 44 items being added to their zero VAT list, and some items they are removing duties on as they import it. Now, I've seen several people in Trinidad laud these moves, and I don't have a problem with them. But really and truly, in Trinidad and Tobago, these moves might not work that well because the reality is They are already in place. We already have zero-rated VAT on many items. Many items are already at zero VAT, and many items already had the tariffs removed quite some time now. So removing the VAT again isn't going to lower the price again. There's no VAT on it to reduce. Bear in mind, what VAT is a tax. That's the government taking some of your money when you buy a good. The government says they're no longer going to take your money when you buy that good, is what the removal of VAT does. And if the government already removed the VAT, they no longer take your little 15% or 12.5% in the case of Trinidad and Tobago. They no longer take that. They allow you to keep it. Now, if they already did that, they can't do it again. Basic foods already VAT-free. Trade Minister Paula Gopi-Schoon, this is an article from May 5th, 2020, 2 years ago, has acknowledged a recommendation from the opposition leader for the removal of import duties and VAT on basic food items. But Gopi-Schoon noted yesterday that from 2015 to now, the Ministry of Trade has obtained CARICOM approval for the suspension of the common external tariff on basic food items like milk, sugar, cheese, oil, corned beef, canned herrings, tuna, mackerel, sardines, pasta, infant formula, and juices. This means that all importers already pay zero import duties for the imports of said items. In addition to that, she spoke about the government reducing our VAT from 15% to 12.5%. That was done in 2016. In addition to that, as a result of that exercise, the vast majority of basic food and essential items remained zero rated, meaning that no VAT is currently charged or payable on such items and hence are already VAT free, which all customers would be able to see on any supermarket bill, it added. So these items are already VAT free. Many of them already don't even have tariffs, so the importers don't have to pay that tax when they import the item. They spoke about removing some of those tariffs even on the pharmaceuticals here in Trinidad and Tobago. So yes, we have had some of those attempts made here. Yes, we have. But in Barbados, they also announced that the school feeding program is going to run through the holidays period too, to ease up that burden, and then they're going to reduce their electricity bill by removing or lowering the VAT again on that bill, meaning the government is going to take less money from you on it. Motley said she will represent an average, she said this will represent an average saving for every household of $17, whether or not they use 250 kilowatt hours. This is critical, and it may not be a lot, but when you see it in conjunction with the other things, it would be well, she says. Motley cited data from the Barbados Light and Power Company, which reveals that 63% of all households in Barbados use 250 kilowatts of electricity or less. So here's another problem in this. So in Barbados, they're getting a little reduction there on their costs below 250 kilowatt hours per the month, I believe that would be. And anything below that, you're getting a little ease on your cost. And over in Barbados, the majority of their households use less than that amount. But then here's another problem when you're looking at Trinidad. We have a different style and standard of living. So some of these measures that may not be that difficult to execute in another country would be different here. You see, if you look at something as simple as the power consumption here in Trinidad and Tobago, our power consumption isn't nearly like that. How much electricity do we use in our homes in TNT? A blog, and this is from 2017, so who knows how these data may have changed since then. Consumption and price categories. Residential electricity consumption is priced based on the amount of energy used by a household on a bi-monthly basis. The three usage categories are as follows: 1 to 400 kilowatt hours, 401 to 1000 kilowatt hours, and over 1000 kilowatt hours. Numerous studies have shown that subsidies lead to wasteful practices. Despite having three consumption categories at various prices, roughly 43% of all households in the country fell in the highest usage category of over 1000 kilowatt hours. So It's a whole different ball game. We use way more power than them. And how are you going to subsidize the usage of power if we're talking about excess usage here in Trinidad and Tobago? So yes, again, a measure that may work there may not necessarily work here. And on top of that, if you look at Barbados electricity prices already, Barbados electricity prices are already nearly 3 times our prices. So yeah, that saving is still going to be over 2 times more expensive than the electricity in Trinidad and Tobago. Perspective. That therefore will mean for them their bill will now move from 204 to 187. The Ministry of Finance through the Customs and Excise Department will expand the list of essential food items on which no VAT will be charged and a few on which no duties will be charged, the PM told the nation. The new VAT-free items, and they went through a list there. We are going further than that, she said. However, for there is no VAT on citrus, and we are now seeking to remove the duties on citrus. And she is saying that they are doing this as part of the government's concerted effort to increase the immunity of Barbadians. Citrus is good for flu-like viruses, COVID-19 being one of them. So they are seeking to drop the price of their citrus to get Barbadians eating or drinking more citrus. I don't have a problem with that. That's a good idea even. But when you look at this over in Barbados, you understand that these measures have a trade-off. It isn't all candy and good things. There is very likely, almost surely, going to be a sting in the tail of this. I went looking to see a little nice concise summary of the situation in Barbados as it refers to the debt and their relation with the IMF. And I found a report from the United States, a report to their Congress on the International Monetary Funds, the IMF, loans to Barbados and Suriname. This report was submitted June the 10th, 2020 from the United States Department of the Treasury. And they generally get pretty in-depth into that because when it all comes down to it, the vast majority of the financial institutions all around the world are pretty closely linked to the US and their treasury. So they have a summary of this here, and they go into a good bit of detail about the problems Barbados would be facing as it relates to their debt and servicing it and where it is right now. And a quick summary of where Barbados stands right now. Barbados has struggled to break free from a vicious cycle of low negative growth since the 2008-09 global financial crisis. On October 1st, 2018, with public debt at around 160% of GDP, the country entered a 4-year extended fund facility for SDR $208 million, about $290 million. To better manage the impact of COVID-19, Barbados requested and received an augmentation of its EFF for an additional $114 million, bringing total access to 323% of quota. What that means is that they got a loan from the IMF basically, they were lent some money, and now they are part of a program, an extended program, where they have a longer period of time to pay back the money, but the IMF and their staff have quite a bit of say in how you structure your economy to allow for this paying back. That's the program that Barbados is currently in. Barbados, to some extent, doesn't technically have full sovereign say over their entire economy because, again, the IMF staff would have quite a bit of say in this. You are using their money. The main pillars of the EFF include, and this is how the EFF works, fiscal adjustment that adopts a primary surplus of 6% of GDP in the medium term, state-owned enterprises reforms to reduce transfers that have become a significant burden on the budget. That's basically they're getting into your state enterprises there and saying you can't just transfer out money to someone without receiving a service. Those goodies that the state enterprises often just give out, the IMF now says, yeah, you have to snip some of that, cut some of that, and they are getting in and determining how you run this. Moving on. Because of the need for assistance to respond to the COVID-19 crisis, bear in mind, this first loan was before COVID-19, 2018. Because of that, the COVID-19, the United States supported the restoration of access to the World Bank Group financing for Barbados because they were not qualified. They were already too far in debt to be qualified for that further financing. But because of the COVID-19 difficulties, the United States says, yeah, get them a blight, they're allowed to get that some further financing because they had previously graduated from eligibility to borrow. I like the technical terms they use to say these things. Barbados had previously graduated from eligibility to borrow. In the Inter-American Development Bank, which does not have a formal graduation policy, the United States agreed to support loans to Barbados for the purpose of responding to the pandemic. So there were multiple loans that the United States supported and facilitated to help Barbados along in this COVID-19 business. Now, bear in mind, these are loans. Again, diving Barbados, pushing Barbados further into debt. And that is really unfortunate for Barbados because, at least judging from the American Treasury Department, their summary of it is that the Barbadian officials, those in charge over in Barbados, seem to have been servicing their debt. If things ran as they were running, Barbados seemed to have been on track to service their debt. The rapid completion of a domestic debt restructuring reduced the public debt to GDP ratio and improved the sustainability of government debt. While Barbados met all program targets for June and September 2021, IMF staff proposed modifying some program targets to reflect the effect of the natural disaster shocks. IMF staff noted that Barbadian authorities will need to deliver more ambitious fiscal adjustment in years ahead to compensate for the loosening of these targets. Again, with the fancy language. Do you understand what that says? They will need to deliver more ambitious fiscal adjustments. So, in other words, they would have to tighten their belt a lot tighter in years ahead because of some of the extra loosening of the belt that occurred during the pandemic. And this report was done before these latest set of announcements were made. So you could imagine that on top of the loosening Barbados was allowed, they have some further loosening here. And all that they are giving out here, they are going to have to pay back for in the future. It's going to be a pretty tough time, and maybe their outlook is that maybe in the future there would be better times, and then yes, we'd be able to make more money and pay back that debt for the more difficult times. But the problem with that in Barbados' case is that they are already in an IMF program. You're already in a program. They are going to determine how you do that restructuring when that time comes, and their measures get pretty stiff. Some of the IMF measures, some people blame and point their fingers at as some of the reason behind the social instability that led to the 1990 coup attempt in Trinidad and Tobago. So that IMF business being in their hold is a difficult thing. But part of the problem is that Barbados just has a very high debt to GDP ratio. What the debt to GDP ratio is pretty simple. GDP, or gross domestic product, how much your country produces, how much you are producing here, creating, versus the debt, how much debt you are in. If you are in more debt than you produce, that means even if you took all of your resources that you produced and paid that all back to servicing your debt, the debt would still be more than that amount. That is a scary place to be. And the problem with that is when that starts to happen, the people that you are borrowing from, they notice, wait, you are owing more than you ever could make. They are going to reduce their likelihood of lending to you because they don't believe you are able to pay it back. And then if it increases too high, you in fact will not be able to pay it back. And then you will default on your debts. And a country defaulting on their debts. Now, you could think like, what you're going to do to a country. If you owe the bank and you default on your debt, the bank will come and take your house or take your car, repossess something. What is a bank going to do to a country? Are they going to repossess Barbados? No, they are not going to do that. You cannot really force a country to pay. But what would happen is no one would lend to the country. And a lot of the development that occurs in a country, a lot of the money that a country uses, comes from credit, comes from borrowing, and no one is going to lend to a country that is defaulting on their payments. Now, the debt to GDP the debt to GDP ratio business isn't necessarily all an automatically horrible thing, because some countries have really high debt to GDP ratios. Japan has a pretty high one. The United States has a pretty high one. But their thing is they could just print more money. They print more money to service their debts. The United States has never defaulted on their debt. So even though their debt to GDP ratio could be sky high, the debtors and lenders will still lend them whatever they need because they're good for it. Barbados isn't in that same position. And there is a likelihood that they can default on it. And when you default on a loan, it is terrible for a country. That's the kind of default on your debt. It's terrible. That's the kind of thing that causes economic crisis. It causes countries to crash. Part of the reason all that trouble is occurring in Sri Lanka was because they defaulted on their debt. Greece defaulted on their debt not too long ago. I can't remember the exact year. And one of the consequences was the government took some of the savings of the civilians, the population, the citizens from inside of the bank. You had your saving in you had your money, your little kakada inside of the bank chilling there, and the government defaulted on their debt and they took some of that money. That's what can happen here. So yes, Barbados is trying to do something for the benefit of their citizens, but it's a risky line. And looking at it and saying it's automatically, yes, that's the best move to make, isn't a sure thing. The future may tell a different story. As some people were sure that lockdowns were the best move to make during the pandemic, and now we have spiking crime, we have reduction in education performance, we have inflation skyrocketing. We're seeing some of the consequences in the long run. And that's part of the problem. It's easy to make decisions in the moment to help in the moment, but those decisions do affect the future. Now, I am not going to say whether that was a good decision or bad, because I don't think I am qualified to make such a statement on behalf of the Barbados Prime Minister. They will find that out in time, I guess. But not all of her moves had to do with things that will cost the government more money. We have also concluded a compact that will be signed on Saturday morning with the private sector that will lead to the reduction of prices on 44 key items for a period of 6 months from the 21st of July of this year to January 31st, 2023, monthly disclosed. The Prime Minister said supermarkets, wholesalers, distributors, and farmers have agreed to review their markups, and for the 44 items have embraced, for the most part, with the exception of 2 or 3, to have markups range between 12 and 15%. This, she explained, would ensure that all Barbadian households, particularly vulnerable, could cope from a drop in price. Now, this I could see as making a lot of sense. And this, I think, is right within the purview of the government. The government is there to get these kind of arrangements going. They could get discussions like this going. Discuss with wholesalers, discuss with retailers, see which retailers are willing to announce a cap on their profit percentage. If some retailers are willing to do it and they are willing to announce it publicly, I am sure the government can get in there and make this public announcement go wider, and the public will know where to shop. I mean, everyone doesn't have to do it. You could mark up whatever markup you want. This isn't about price control, and Miss Motley said that. This isn't about price control. It's about having an agreement with the business people as being members of the same community to allow each other to survive during this time. You don't make a ridiculous markup which allows me to purchase your item. I don't boycott you. I buy your item still, and I know that it's not that you are trying to fleece me. I know what your profit margin is. We could relate to each other on this. And that, to me, that move, I fully agree with. The other moves that cost their government money, I as I said, I'm not qualified to see whether that's right or wrong, but the agreement on the side of civil society, on the side of private sector, that makes a lot of sense. And I think our government, our country, could take a page from that. How about some organizations make it clear what their profit margins are and determine that we are going to keep our profit margins at X percentage. And we reveal this to the public, so we know this in and of itself is an advertisement. Any other business that doesn't want to do that, that's their prerogative, and they don't, and the customers make a decision based on that. What do you think? Drop a comment and tell me what you think. That's all I have for now. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained, and I will see you later.